Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about how the NBA has changed over the last 30 years. I feel like there's always a constant debate over what era was the greatest era of basketball. You've got the old heads who miss the days that you could body check a guy at the rim, saying that players now are too soft, and they wouldn't last a day against the bad boy Pistons. Then on the other hand, you have guys now claiming that Michael Jordan was winning championships against plumbers and FedEx drivers. As always, the truth is somewhere in the middle. So I've already done a video comparing eras, and ultimately I came to the conclusion the skill level across all sports is increasing as the years go on, and it's very rarely ever decreasing. But today I want to showcase how the NBA has changed over the years, aesthetically, and maybe I'll change my mind by the end of this video. Maybe by the end I'll be saying that Bob Pettit is the GOAT. Let's start with the style of play, and the skill level that the style of play requires. So I want to go back to the 80s. Actually, I want to go back to 1979 when the three-point shot was implemented into the NBA. The rookie season of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. It's not relevant, but I thought it was interesting. Before this time, no one shot the ball from over 22 feet away. It would have been like a logo 3 now. Just a showboaty thing to do if you're up 30. If you watch a lot of the highlights from the 70s, it's a lot of transition layups and two-point shots that are really close to the basket. There's no perimeter game whatsoever. This was even before they had shot tracking, like a floor map where you could see where everyone was shooting the ball. I just had to go back and watch highlights from the 70s. And I'll say, watching highlights from the 70s, the defense is bad. The highlights don't seem all that impressive, because the defense seems to be lacking a bit of intensity. At the same time, vintage highlights are always played in slow motion for some reason. So maybe that has something to do with it, I don't know. Also, another important thing to remember is that there was mad goaltending in this era. I'm obviously not the first person to point this out. There's compilations on YouTube of Wilt Chamberlain blatantly goaltending. He's totally blocking the ball on the way down. These were counted as legit blocks on the stat sheet. Elmore Smith holds the record for most blocks in a game with 17, which feels crazy, right? If a player gets 7 blocks in a game, that's gonna lead NBA Today the next morning. So I watched some clips of Elmore Smith, and it kind of makes sense to me. Some of the blocks are legit. Don't get me wrong, Elmore's a beast, but some of these are definitely goaltends. But they didn't have the technology to review to see if the ball was on the way down. Also, some are fouls, and some are just missed shots. Scorekeepers could have just tacked on another block for good measure. Who gives a in 50 years, who's gonna care? But here we are, 50 years later, talking about the legitimacy of Elmore Smith's blocks. Why are we doing this? So it makes me think that the advancement of technology has changed stats. Being able to run back an entire game and watch it from different angles gives the stat keepers a better opportunity to have an accurate account of what happened in the game. I believe that Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in a game, but I don't care because you can't prove it. There's no evidence. There's better proof of Bigfoot. So now we've talked about where players were shooting from. Let's talk about the patterns of shooting in the 1990s. Like we've talked about, there are very few three-point shots. You got a lot of shots in the paint by the hoop. That's gonna account for a lot of transition layups and dunks. But get a load of all these baseline too. This is such a weird shot, considering the shots from dead on get no love. You'd expect guys to want to shoot where they could see the backboard. Depth perception is a pretty useful thing when it comes to accuracy. Well, it's because of defensive positioning. It's a lot different than it is now, since players weren't shooting threes. And there was no such thing as illegal defense at the time. The defense would just clog the paint, and then just have one guy stand in front of the rim. Players would then drive the lane and be forced out to the edges. Most offenses involved getting as close as you could with a shot by the baseline. Wait, what's that about illegal defense? What does that mean? Illegal defense is also known as the 3-second rule. You probably know it that way. And it was implemented in 2001. A defensive player can't just camp out in the lane for more than 3 seconds. He either has to actively guard someone or leave the lane. Players like Shaq obviously weren't a fan of this rule. Defense had been pretty simple for them their whole career. They used to just run back on defense and protect the rim. So I'm very fascinated by rule changes in sports, because it kind of proves that there is an aesthetic perfection in a sport. There's an ideal way to play the game that makes it enjoyable for spectators. For instance, the offensive 3-second rule has existed since 1936, which is crazy that they realized so early that a bunch of dudes hanging out by the rim is kind of boring to watch. Although some people say they implemented the rule not because it wasn't fun to watch, but because big men were getting too aggressive. Okay, that may be true, but I'm sure it also sucked to watch. So along with the 3-second rule implementation was the league allowing zone defense in 2001. If you don't know what zone defense is, it's just that a defender is responsible for guarding an area rather than a man. The reason it was banned in the first place was for the same reason they didn't want people to crowd the rim. But that problem was solved when they introduced the defensive 3-second rule. Are you following this? So they allowed zone defense again. All of this shows that the NBA believes the best style of basketball involves fluid movement of the ball. The NBA wants players to pass, so much so that there was actually an illegal offense. You weren't allowed to move all your players past the key and isolate one player down low.
Sixers go to Willie Burton out of the timeout, and now we'll get a whistle.
They get an illegal offense, George. You see that called very often. What happens, they had 3 guys out top. You got to have one guy down in the corner.
Isolating a guy in the post, I guess, is known as ugly basketball. I don't care. I don't mind it. So I think the biggest talking point for the then versus now argument is the old heads saying that the game used to be more physical. The whole "these players wouldn't last the day" in the 90s rhetoric, which I have to say to some degree has a little bit of truth in it. They did allow for a little more physical contact back then. For instance, up until 2004, you were allowed to hand check guys, meaning you could actually rest your hand or your arm on the offensive player. You could even smash your pelvis into him if you wanted. Ultimately, what this did is it made players move laterally on defense. That was the only way they could stay in front of their man. You couldn't just ride the player's momentum to the hoop. Also, I think you could make a little more contact with players in the paint, but not like that much more. I even remember back in the early 2000s, people were always talking about how many fouls were being called in the NBA. But the biggest difference was in 1990, they introduced the flagrant foul. A flagrant 1 being unnecessary contact, and a flagrant 2 being excessive contact, leading to an immediate ejection from the game. This was mainly put into place because of the bad boy Pistons. Guys like Joe Dumars and Bill Laimbeer would hack the snot out of guys, and the only consequence was a common foul. It's pretty interesting that the 2 seasons before the flagrant foul was introduced, the Pistons won the championship, but then the bad boys never won again. Sounds like someone took away their cheat code. I think I played this on the last video, but here's Charles Oakley saying that Giannis couldn't play back in the 90s.
He wouldn't have been a force back in the days. He wouldn't have been a force.
Why is that?
He would have struggled because they was making 2 jump shots. He wasn't going to be doing no Europe to the basket like he doing. You'll step to the basket and just get layup. No, somebody going to knock his head off. He wouldn't come on the bench back in the days.
Yo, come on.
That's kind of heavy.
Come on.
I think this is kind of the ultimate old head take. He's not wrong. I think if Giannis would have done a Euro step in 1989, he would have got his clock clean. But I don't think he would have done a Euro step. He would have found a different way to play the game. I think he would have looked a lot more like Patrick Ewing. What do I know though? Which actually brings me to my next point. Giannis has a skill set that the players from the Stone Age didn't have. Giannis can bring the ball up the court and he can pass. No one ever asked Oak to bring the ball up the court. Maybe he would have been an awesome point guard, who knows? Even Shaq admitted that Giannis was better than him at the age of 24.
At 24, I was just doing big man stuff. He's doing guard stuff, playing defense on the perimeter, switching. So he's actually much better than I was at 24.
Shaq points out that Giannis has a significantly larger skill set than he did. And you know Shaq, he's not the type to be self-effacing or flippantly praise a young player. Big men in the league now have to be able to play basketball well. The league has eliminated a lot of the advantages that players had because of their size. They were trying to get out of what was known as the dead ball era, which was a period of time between 1997 and 2006, where the pace of the game was slow, the possessions were slow, and the scoring was anemic. This was due to big men being the stars of the league and that isolation low post back down game. But after the league implemented all these changes, as well as having the shot clock reset after an offensive rebound to 14 seconds, not 24 seconds, offense picked back up again. But the big man role did diminish. Centers were so irrelevant that a guy like DeAndre Jordan made first team All-NBA because every All-NBA team had to have a center. No disrespect to DJ, good for him. My point is that centers weren't the most skilled players in the league. Cut to now. The 3 guys with the most MVP votes over the last 6 years are all over 6'11". Giannis might be 7 foot. I feel like he's probably that tall. Now, centers are some of the most skilled players in the league, and they're huge. One thing that the league has changed that I'm not particularly fond of is the regulations on taunting. Taunting rules keep getting more and more strict, which I understand to some degree. Some of these were really disrespectful taunts. But I think as long as you don't unnecessarily step into a guy's personal space, anything should fly. So AI stepping over Ty Lue, in my book, that would not fly. But this finger point from Cade is totally chill. Kind of badass, man. He got a tech for that, which I guess he deserved. You can't direct a taunt at an individual player. I guess they're afraid of another Malice in the Palace situation breaking out. So I guess what I said in the last video when I covered this topic, it probably still stands. With the growth of popularity in basketball, competition to be in the league and have a spot is getting stiffer and stiffer. There's more money in the NBA. There's more money in other leagues as well. There's guys working out all summer in the hopes of getting a 2-way contract or a 10-day contract. There's no doubt to me that while this might not be the most physically taxing era of basketball, the NBA is full of the most skilled players we've ever seen play the game. Alright, thanks for being here. Like the video if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't like the video, dislike the video. This was a suggestion, so I'm very thankful for those. Leave a comment. I reply to every single comment. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog if you want to eat a corn dog, but talk to a stranger about basketball.